Hello, sword fighters, it's Silent Signs from I Dream of Indie, and today we are taking a look at Zorro The Chronicles from developer BKOM Studios and publisher Nacon. If you're anything like me, you may be familiar with the character of Zorro, sword fighting guy in a black mask, but you may or may not know that there is an animated Zorro series called Zorro The Chronicles. This aired around 2015 through 2016, and from what I can tell, never actually came to the United States, so if this iteration of our favorite sword fighting hero doesn't look super familiar, that may be why. Fear not though, I can absolutely confirm you do not need a prior knowledge of the series or even really of Zorro in general to play this game. You get a nice animated intro that introduces Zorro as a cool horse-riding, sword-wielding badass, and that's really about it. And I mean, do you really need to know more about Zorro as a character? Maybe don't answer that, but this is very clearly a family-oriented game and meant to be approachable for anyone who is or isn't familiar with the series. From there, you get to choose between two different playable characters, Diego and Inez. For the most part, they play very similarly, but Inez has more health and Diego has a little bit more of an energy bar. Honestly, while you're actually playing, the difference between the two characters feels pretty negligible, especially considering you can level up your characters to add extra hearts and energy bars, so eventually it just becomes a moot point, and you can just pick the one that looks cooler, which I would argue is Inez. At this point, you might be tempted to check the options menu, and I will warn you, the options are incredibly limited, and I know I say that pretty frequently, but this time I mean it. You can turn the volume up and down on the sound effects and the music, you can adjust the sensitivity of the cursor, and you can pick a language. There are no visual settings whatsoever, which I found honestly pretty surprising. This probably makes complete sense if you are playing this on the Nintendo Switch or on a console, but playing this on PC, it was a little bit odd to not have visual options or resolution choices, so just a fair warning to those trying to run this game on a potato. It did run fine on my PC for what it's worth, but if you typically have to lower the quality of the visuals in order for a game to run well, you might be out of luck here. Take a moment with me, if you will, to play a little memory game. This is what I would like you to keep fresh in your mind until a little bit later in the review. When you boot up Zorro The Chronicles, you get a message that implores you to play the game with a controller, since that is the preferred method of gameplay. This is a moment of foreshadowing. But I've made it far enough into this video without actually telling you what the game's all about, so let's dive into the gameplay, shall we? The combat is really straightforward. You have an attack, a dodge, and a counter. You have a special ability you can use to carve your Z into your foes in various hilarious ways. Holding down the block button allows you to run. You do not have a jump, which is a little bit bizarre, but I'll allow it. You essentially use your whip to propel you through the air to a platform. There are some other odds and ends of moves that your character can complete, such as throwing a stone when you're perched high above to distract enemies on the ground below. This allows you to attack them from above, but I do have to ask, where is your character keeping these stones? Because that outfit is rather skin tight and they never seem to run out. Asking the important questions here. You also have a spyglass which you can use to survey your surroundings and mark enemies. And you will use some combination of all of these moves and abilities to fight your way through hordes of enemies in order to accomplish a specific task on your mission. Usually this mission will involve collecting pieces of a map or keys to unlock prisoners. I will say in the missions I have played thus far, there doesn't seem to be a ton of variety. It does feel a little bit repetitive after doing a few in a row, but one nice thing is that you don't have to necessarily complete all of your missions in order. So after you complete the first one, the game opens up a little bit to a world map where you can then choose your missions from there. You also have a little bit of free will in choosing between the two playable characters each time, and you have the option to drop in at a stealth location or in the heat of combat. All of this helps to at least keep things a little bit interesting. In addition, you collect Zorro coins, which can help level up your characters in a variety of different ways by acquiring new skills, and as I mentioned before, adding additional health or charge ups for your KOs. There are posters scattered about each level which you can vandalize, and those serve as your collectibles, which I thought was a fun touch. I'd say the actual combat and gameplay isn't particularly challenging. I took on the normal mode, though hard is an option as well. The game gives you some options as far as how you approach situations. If you're more of a stealthy player, you can certainly sneak up on enemies and perform stealth kills, jump in for aerial attacks, but my preferred method of combat is always balls to the wall, just running in swinging, and I was perfectly successful doing that as well, so take from that what you will. The graphics certainly aren't offensive to look at. In some cases, I'd say they are downright lovely, particularly in the cutscenes, but in actual gameplay, things can get a little bit janky. First of all, after playing a few missions in a row, you will find that a lot of the enemies look very similar, so things get a little bit repetitive on that end, but you have a variety of different ways to dispose of your enemies. I say dispose of because you can't actually kill anyone in this game. They just kind of get stunned and fall on the ground, or their pants fall down, which apparently renders them unable to fight back. But they all kind of just fall willy-nilly unless you have led them to a very specific trap, and their heads end up going through walls, or they're just perched in very precarious positions. It's all very weird to take in. That said, I did really appreciate a lot of the different types of KOs. They got a little bit repetitive, but they still made me laugh every time, so I'll count that as a win. Especially the chicken one. I want to destroy all of my enemies with chickens from now on. Despite the overall lack of graphical setting options, the game did run at 60 frames per second. The camera angles, on the other hand, were rough. Half the time I found myself fighting an enemy without even being able to see them, which was annoying. I still won, but it's the principle of the matter, you know? And now it's time to see how you did on your memory game. Remember earlier in this review when I told you about how the game recommends that you play on a controller? Well, I did play on a controller. In fact, I turned off my mouse and keyboard at a certain point because I wanted to make sure nothing was interfering with the input, and every time I tried to select an upgrade for one of my characters or a mission to enter, the game went back and forth between keyboard and mouse inputs and controller inputs and wouldn't let me select unless I turned my mouse back on and clicked it with the mouse. All joking aside, this seems like it should be a pretty easy fix, and if you're playing this on a console, it's not going to be a problem at all, but definitely worth mentioning if you are playing this very early on the PC, as I was. Soundtrack and soundscape in general are very well done. I'd say that the music sounds exactly like you would expect a Zorro game to sound. You have that kind of guitar work that fits right in this sort of environment. Smashing through boxes and defeating enemies produces a satisfying sound effect result. I think sound design was probably my favorite aspect of this game. The music is great. I loved that the enemies would make these ridiculous grunts and groans as they fell to their knees in fear from chickens. It's just a fun time, and it really makes this into what I would call a nice family-friendly way to introduce your kids or younger players to Zorro as a franchise. I'm not sure I would personally go in and replay this one solo as an adult, but it did make me hungry for a new, more violent adult version of a Zorro game. I know there have been Zorro games in the past, but if anybody out there is a developer and is listening, I would absolutely play another one.
Thank you so much for supporting clickbait-free content here at I Dream of Indie. We would now like to take a moment to shout out our brave indie warriors and legends that help support us through channel memberships. At the Indie Warriors tier, we have Bill, Christian Cruz, Adriana Amato, CJR, PSC, Julian Kolbis, Jesse, Ray Lynn, Marky Mint, Dave Harp, Peekaboo, Lex Noyle, Strict9, and Chic Geek. At the Indie Legends tier, we have Jen Rose, Larkison, Mitchell Hall, Skeptism, C. Coyle, Nathan Moore, Chris Jackson, Mr. W, Blue Francis 14, The Beefarinis, Business Cody, Carmen Red, Jace Glover, King of the Hatch, Ophidian Mind, and Lord Metroid. Thank you so much for all that you do for independent developers, publishers, and for I Dream of Indie. Head on down to the description box below. Let's defeat the gaming echo chamber and bring a voice to the voiceless ones in gaming.